So carrying on here, the rendering is complete. Now we're still on page. Let's see what page of the notes we're on here. We're on page 3, about halfway down. Post rendering adjustments. So right as the rendering is complete, so immediately after the rendering is complete, you have the chance to go into the adjust exposure dialog box. And here you can make some adjustments to saturation, so the amount of color that you see in the view. You can increase the exposure, so you just brighten things up a little bit. So you just drag the little sliders around and then hit apply, and straight away you can see the impact that it has on the picture, and it's quite pronounced. These are not changes that would be the same as you would make in Photoshop. So Photoshop would be you just wouldn't be able to make these same changes, especially things like the changing the amount of saturation or changing the color temperature here. So if you want to kind of make it a little bit more of a warmer orangey color, or if you're looking at it and kind of wanting to turn it towards the blue. So all these things here, you can adjust the amount of shadowing here that you get in the darkened areas, how much highlighting you get. So your whites appear whiter when you crank up the highlights, and your darks appear darker if you crank up the shadows. So you can always go back to reset. And so here I'm going to just play with a few things here. Okay, so let's talk about file formats when you export. So after you've got the exposure settings to what you like, you know, I realized I forgot to do a transparent background. Hopefully we'll still be okay, but I'm not sure that we will. So if we go to export here, if you use the PNG or TIFF formats, you will get a transparent background for your image. So here I'm going to save a JPEG. And now I'm going to export a PNG. And I'm just going to go look at the results here. So there's my render. Now again, I did this at a fairly low resolution because I just wanted this thing to render while we were on the break. And then here if we look, and unfortunately I forgot to choose the transparent background. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rerun the render with a transparent background, and we'll come back to this in a minute. So we'll let Revit do its thing here. It's going to redo the rendering. And along with people PNGs and tree PNGs that I've got a library on, I will just choose sky backgrounds as a search term. Now, sometimes you will have maybe a picture of the sky around the area where your project is being done, or maybe you've got an empty site and you are able to provide a high resolution photograph that you can use as a background layer in your Photoshop work. So what I'm just doing here is trying to get a different background to use behind the render. So I'm going to use I want something that's not too dramatic here, something that's nice, but maybe not looking like something out of Lord of the Rings. So if you're in an area where there is mountains, that's great. So how about this one here? So it's 1600 pixels wide, so that's not too bad. So I am going to save this onto the desktop. Okay, so let's look at how you can use desktop or your Photoshop to layer all this stuff up. So I'm just starting up Photoshop here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring all the different parts of these renders in and just start stacking them up on top of each other so that we can have the rendering and then our trees and then the sky background. So first of all, I'm going to bring in the background. So opening it up. Okay, it doesn't like that file format, so let's just grab a different one here. No, that's not high enough resolution. All right. Okay, it's a JPEG, so that's good. What have I got going on here? Come on, save as. I'm batting 0 here. Okay, I'm just going to get any old image I can here. Okay, I'm going to close the browser down and try that again. It looks like I've managed to crash Chrome as well. Okay, let's try that again. Oh, for crying out loud. Oh, that's not the one. Sorry about this, folks. Just always happens when you're trying to do too much at once. Okay. There we go. Not really what I had in mind, so I'm going to go back to the mountain background here. Okay. All right. So let's get this into Photoshop here. Good grief. Well, this is when things are going completely sideways. Okay, I am going to give GIMP a try here. So you folks will get a chance to look at GIMP, which I haven't installed yet. So let's install it right now so we can get this going. So GIMP, download. It's not a very big download. It's quite a bit smaller than Photoshop. So $200 megs. So we'll see how our rendering is doing here. So if we look at the Revit render now, you can see how the background is transparent. So that checkerboard pattern is clearly visible. So I'm going to export the render now. And so I'll just make a note here, transparent. Okay, so it's a slightly different interface than Photoshop, of course, but it is a great piece of software. So we'll come back to that in just a few minutes after GIMP has finished rendering. Now, if I were to do the rendering again and I increase the render size up to, say, 3000 pixels, whenever you double the size of your render in pixels, be aware that it makes your rendering take 4 times as long. And that's because, of course, when you double the size of the image, you're squaring basically the number of pixels. So if I make the image 150% bigger than it was previously, then of course that's 1.5 times 1.5, which is 2.25. And if you make it double the size, then it's 2 times 2, which is 4 times the number of pixels. And so it takes at least 4 times as long to render an image that's twice the size. So a trick that I will recommend for when you're doing your renders is to break your renders up into 2 pieces. So let's say that I want to do a really high resolution image. So here you can see 6,000 pixels of this window. Now this rendering would take several hours to complete. So the trick to dealing with these really large renderings is to break them up into smaller pieces, render the pieces, and then put them together in Photoshop. So if you cut the render size, the physical size of the image in half, you can basically save yourself half the time when it comes to rendering. So this is a trick that I've used before, and I've timed it, and it does, maybe it doesn't save me 50% of the time, but it's a significant savings in time. So the trick is this. What we need to do is make a copy of the view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find some kind of center point here that's going to be a point of reference for the render. So I'm just using the tip of that turbine blade in the background. So then in my original view here, I'm going to adjust the crop region and bring it over so there's just a little bit of overlap in the middle. So this means that I'm going to have, when I lay these 2 images on top of each other in Photoshop, I've got a common point of reference for merging the 2 images together to create a single render. So that process that that we're just describing here can help save you a bunch of time in getting to that final version of the image. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start up GIMP here, and we're going to layer in all those images. So if we look at the rendering, that was done. Here's the render here. And you can see that it is going to be transparent once we bring it into our image manipulation program. Okay, so here's GIMP. So I'm going to make this full screen here, and we are going to open up, first of all, the background. All right, and now I'm going to open up the render. So to copy the render over to the other view, Control A to select everything here, select all, Control A, and then we're going to copy it, Control C, and then we're going to switch over to the other view here, and then paste it in. So you can see what's going to happen here. we are going to be able to adjust our render and have a different background behind it. Now, of course, I haven't really chosen a great background here for this. It's perhaps not the uh, most appropriate background here, but you can see the effect. This will allow us to have our own background. Now, in terms of the layering effect here, so we're talking about those trees here, so I'm just going to open up this transparent tree, and I'm going to select all, and then copy it. And then I'm going to switch back over to my rendering here and paste it into the view as well. Now, because I've got these different views on different layers, what we're going to be able to do, if you're familiar with Photoshop, is you're going to be able to adjust the transparency of each one of those layers so that the trees in the foreground can be made transparent. So that's something that you will often see in renders, is where foreground trees and foreground people are made transparent. So here, if I just reduce the opacity there, so you can see it's making this this tree a little bit more transparent, so you can see what's behind it. Okay, so we're going to move on here and talk about interior renders, and we're also going to talk about controlling lights. Now, for this part of tonight's exercise, we should, I'm going to close down this file, and I'll get you folks to open up the advanced sample project. So you should see that in your list of sample files when you open up Revit. Just open up the advanced sample project. Now, in this project, we are going to open up the third floor night rendering. So this is the view right here. And we're going to discuss a feature of lights that if you use them in a render, you're going to get far better results. Now, if you folks have had a chance to download tonight's Session 11 files using WinSCP, which I did a few moments ago, so I'm just going to open up that file now. I'm going to show you which file you need to open on the or from the Session 11 folder. So if you haven't done it now, don't worry. Of course, this video will be posted on YouTube a little bit later, so that you can come back and revisit this. So I'm going to open a family. So I'm going to go to the desktop here where I've stored our Session 11 files. And so here I'm going to go inside the Philips folder here and look at this light object. Okay, so I'm going to go to 3D here. And so what we're looking at here is basically a twin fluorescent fixture that would be placed on the ceiling. So we're kind of looking at it upside down. So typically, of course, it would be inserted more like this, and we would be looking up at the fixture instead of down on the fixture. So the fixture is kind of upside down, and we're looking at it as if it's been laid on the floor. Now, what we're going to be getting into here is a special kind of file that is usually provided to Revit users by the folks who are providing the family. So often the manufacturers have people in-house who have high Revit expertise, and they are able to model families with good detail, and that they accurately represent the appearance of the manufacturer's product. Now, there is a particular kind of file called an IES file. Now, if you were to get onto the internet here and look up IES, so it's the Illuminating Engineering Society. Now, I don't know about you, but these guys are such hardcore geeks that the Illuminating Engineering Society, the files that they make for us to use, have the same acronym as their organization's name. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty cool. I might be a geek, but there you have it. So when you go to find a light fixture for Revit, so I'm just going to go to BIM Object here, so bimobject.com. Highly recommend this website. Lots of really great products on here. So I'm just going to log in here, and they don't send you spam. They're a good company that way. Okay, so I am going to look for a ceiling light. So if I were to look at any one of these fixtures, I'd be able to find the model for it, the Revit model. So if I go to the download section here, you can see I can download both the Revit file and the IES files that go along with this fixture. So what these IES files represent is the combination of lamps and perhaps voltage and perhaps the color temperature of those lamps that are going into the fixture. And all of that will inform Revit how the light output should look for that particular family. So if you go to bimobject.com, pretty much every light fixture that I've seen or downloaded from BIMobject has those IES files there. And I'm going to show you how they're used in a real project. But first of all, we're going to talk about what it is that these IES files do inside our families. Now, looking at one of these light families, if you turn on the light source, if you see something that looks like a wasp's nest or like a bizarre little, origami bag, that is an indication that the family is going to output light in an accurate way. So it means that the IES file, which accurately represents the light distribution from this family, has been provided to you. Now, a lot of the families that you might get out of the box in Revit here, so I'm just going to go and open up a family from the Revit library here. So I'm just going into the US Imperial Library, and I'm going down to lighting, and I'll just grab one of these internal lights here. So let's say, here we go, just this wall washer light. So here's the out of the box light fixture. And this one actually does have, it looks like it's got a little bit more of an accurate light model here. Some of the light fixtures that you might use that are in the Revit library have a very simplistic light model. Now, when you click in a light family, so if you go into a light family and you go to its visibility and you turn on the light source, you can select the light source, and then up on the ribbon, you will see the light source definition. So what this does is in the family, it allows you to toggle between using a realistic light source, using a light distribution, or you can use what we call an idealized light distribution, where light is emanating from a geometrically rectangular or a geometrically regular object, and light is being emitted sort of perfectly in all directions radially from the object. So there you go. That's what an idealized light source looks like. It's very smooth. It doesn't have any, what would you call it? asymmetries anywhere. And in fact, I did a render once in a project. We had a bunch of suspended fixtures, and they had a glass lens that went around the fixture, and they were suspended from the ceiling. And when the rendering was done, I noticed that about halfway up the walls, the paint changed color. And so I stopped the render and I checked the wall, and I had not painted a separate color on the wall. So I went and I rendered it again. And sure enough, I got that change in paint color about halfway up the wall. And then it dawned on me that the light fixture that I was using one of these idealized, perfect light sources. And what it was doing is it was casting a razor sharp shadow on the wall. So the lens on the fixture was providing the shadow point. And so I was just getting a difference in light amount. Because, of course, if you look around you in a room, lights have what they call fall off. So if you look, at light shadowing on our walls, it doesn't just have a razor edge shadow. There's a little bit of graduation where the light falls off from being quite bright in a certain area to more dim. So what we want to ensure is that light families are, in fact, using the Photometric Web for their definition so that we get accurate renders. So when we go to use one of these light fixtures in a project, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to load that light fixture in on the ceiling here. So there's our building, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to hide category the roof, and I'm going to hide category. Actually, I'm going to isolate this one ceiling. Isolate element. So there's a ceiling. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to load that light fixture that we were just looking at. That one right there. So I'm just going to load it and stick this thing onto the ceiling. So there's our light fixture. And I'm going to go down to light fixtures here in the project. I'm going to turn on the light source. So there's that funny little wasp nest hanging down from the light fixture. Now, when you are using a light fixture in your project, what you're going to want to do is to make sure that it's using the proper IES value for the fixture. Now, if you don't necessarily know which combination of bulbs and all that stuff that you're using, it really doesn't matter that much. But if you do not see that little wasp nest feature on your fixture when you turn on the light source for that lighting object, then that means you do need to point your family to one of these IES files. So what you got to do is go in and go to the type properties, and as you see farther on in the notes or up on page 5, there will be a location here where you find right here the Photometric Web file. Now this one's already got a web file that it's pointing to, but if your fixture doesn't show that wasp nest effect when you've got the light source turned on, it means that you actually need to point this family to one of the IES files that you've downloaded from BIM Object. So here I've just got to choose one of these. I'm just going to choose one at random here, hit open, and hit OK. And of course, if I were to choose a different IES Photometric Web file, so here I'll choose one of the others. And we'll just see if that makes a difference here. Not much. Didn't make much of a difference. So it might just change the light intensity that's coming out of that fixture. So that's an important feature of our light fixtures. We want to make sure that we are providing that. That's sort of our first point. Now, I'm going to go back to the 3D view where we're going to get ready to do the render there. Okay, so in this view, we've got a series of light fixtures, and you folks can see them all here. Some of them have been grouped. We need to address that. But when we do night renders, if I were to do a rendering right now of this view, not only would Revit enable the light fixtures in this view and cause them to put light out into the scene, Revit would also illuminate rooms that we can't even see because of the direction that the camera is facing and because there might be walls between this camera and those other locations. So the point is, why have lights turned on in a render if you can't even see those lights at all? So when you're doing night renders, one of the important things that you can do to help with reducing your render time is to be able to literally turn light fixtures on and off so that they are not emitting light in the render. So this is a way that you can save some render time. So loading an IES file, that is in the type properties of a light fixture. So if I just click on this light fixture here and we go into edit type, one of the settings down in the list here is Photometric Web file. Let's see here. You know what? I don't think this this fixture doesn't even have Photometric Web. Let me go back to 3D here. So if you've got a fixture where the Photometric Web has been built into the design by the manufacturer, so here in type properties, for this particular fixture, it does have a Photometric Web because that's something that's been built into the design of this particular light fixture. So if you do not see a photometrics section in the type properties of one of your light fixtures, I wouldn't use it for rendering purposes. You're not going to get very good results from that light fixture when you go to render it. So when I go into this view here and I click on the properties of this light fixture and I go to its type properties, you'll notice that there is no, well, there is a photometric section, but there is no Photometric Web entry. So that's not a good sign. So that would mean to me go and make some changes in the family so that that Photometric Web feature is enabled. If we edit the family here, so again, you can see this particular family is using that really idealized symmetrical light distribution method, and that's not good. So if we click on the light source in the family, we can switch the light source from being idealized, you know, a perfect geometrically pure distribution of light, to a real world definition of light. So by going into the family and switching it to Photometric Web mode, when we go back and load this into the project, that Photometric Web feature should be enabled so that you can go and find the IES value for this light and make it render properly. So there it is there, Photometric Web file. So we just switch it from generic and we would go and find the proper IES value for this fixture. So like I said, this is pretty rare. Generally speaking, when you go and get those light fixtures from BIM object, the Photometric Web setting has already been turned on. And then it's just a matter of you going into the dialog box here, going and finding one of the IES values for that fixture and rendering away. So back to the point here about what we do to control our lights so that we only have the lights turned on in a certain area when we're doing a night render. So the best way to manage this is to go into 3D so that we can isolate the lights in our project so that we can control control those lights and turn some of those lights on and turn other lights off. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of peer in, and there's one light fixture just sitting on the wall there, a little wall sconce. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate category. So this means in 3D, all I'm going to see are light fixtures. Now you can see I've turned on the I've turned on the light source for a bunch of these families. I'm going to turn that off because it's kind of distracting. There we go. Okay. So what I want to do here is to create what are called light groups. All right, so trying to get rid of that little annotation that somebody's put on the screen. Oh, I can't get rid of it. Oh well. Okay. Now, some of these lights, when they were put into the model, they were grouped. They used an array command to group those lights. So the first thing I need to do is find all the lights that have been put into an array group and ungroup them. I'm not going to be able to control which light group they are in if they have been arrayed. So I'm just going to find all these arrayed lights and ungroup them. Now you can see I've got some 4th floor lights and I have some 3rd floor lights. Now when you click on a light fixture in your model, Revit shows if it appears to a particular light group. So here's all the light groups that are built into this project. So if you want to define some light groups, you just click on any light fixture in your project, and up on the top here where there's this light group settings, you hit edit. So here it shows you all the different lights that are in this group. So you've got a whole bunch of lights here that are on the wall. Now this will allow you to add or remove lights into this group so they can be turned on and off at once. Now you notice here that the light groups that have been created in this project are pendant lights, so lights hanging from the ceiling, table lamps, and scone lights. Scone lights. Aren't scones like buns that you can eat? So I guess they are they're edible lights, so you can take them off the wall and eat them if you're feeling a little bit snackish. I think they meant to say sconce lights. Anyway, we're going to get rid of all these groups. They don't make any sense. What I want to do is isolate my 4th floor lights from my 3rd floor lights in the corridor so that I can turn them on and off as needed in my renders. So what I'm going to do here, you need to select one of your light objects. It doesn't matter which one. And instead of going to the edit button here to edit the lights in the group, that's not what we're going to do here. What we need to do is edit the light groups. So instead of using edit here, go into the drop-down menu and choose edit new. So here is where we can define the different light groups in the project. And think of a light group as being a bunch of lights that you can flick on or off with a switch. So here they can turn their pendants on and off at once, their tables lights on and off, and their their scone lights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of these groups. Now this doesn't delete the light fixtures, it just deletes the light groups. So I'm clicking in any of these groups and I'm deleting them. So now we don't have any light groups. So if I click on one of these lights, there's no groups. So what I'm going to do is I am going to select all of my 4th floor lights, like so. And I'm going to create a new group. 4th floor lights. All right, so now that I've created that group, I'm going to select all of these lights. And I'm going to put them into the 4th floor lights group. So just from the drop-down menu, just simply click it, and there you go. And Revit just does the confirmation to let you know that you're moving all the lights into the group. Done. Then the lights down below, we want to add to a third floor light group. So we're going to pick one of them here. Actually, we'll pick them all. Edit new. New group. Third floor lights. There we go. So now I select all those lights and put them into the third floor lights group. And now all those lights will go into the group. So the significance of having put all these lights into these groups is this. When I go into the rendering dialog box for this view, here we go. I can now enter the artificial lights dialog box. And so what this will allow me to do is to turn off lights that I don't need to see in this view. So the lights are still geometrically present. They are just not emitting any light, and we will get a pretty significant reduction in render time by making this happen. So now when we go to do the rendering, our render time will be sped up accordingly because of that change. So that is one of the features of interior renderings that you folks should know about so that you can deal with the use of light groups to increase the speed of your renders and therefore decrease the amount of time it takes to complete an interior render. All right, so let's take another 10-minute break.
Before we get a break,
yes.
Hello, Wes, could you please repeat how to load the IES file?
Oh, okay, sure. Yep. Okay, so you simply select one of your light fixtures and you go to its type properties and you scroll on down into the photometrics section of its type properties, and in the Photometric Web file parameter, put your cursor in that, click on the little button here, and then go and navigate to where you have downloaded the IES family, or the IES files for this particular fixture. So just remember that when you download your light fixture from BIM Object, you want to get the Revit family and the IES files. You will need to unzip them. So typically when you get these IES files from online, you will get them in a zip file. So here you can see this Photometric Files, it's a zip file. So inside that are all of the different IES files. So for Revit to be able to find them and use them, just remember to unzip these photometric files or decompress them so that they are directly visible by the operating system and not stored inside a zipped file or a compressed folder. So just keep that in mind. Any other questions before we break for 10 minutes here?
That doesn't have any more, so we can take a break right now.
Okay, sounds good.